just to understand that these are predatory entities, and they're not there to help you, they are there to make money. Members of my family were very hesitant to get credit cards, very hesitant to deal with the banks overall because they had had negative experiences. So I already came into it with this feeling that this was some kind of a predatory institution from the beginning. And so I understand banks are a tool that we have to use in our society, but I'm also under no illusion of what they are doing and who they think is worth preying on. And I think, having that experience, being 18, 19, 20 years old back in 2001, 2002, 2003, and then seeing the financial collapse come about, seeing 2008 happen and seeing the financial collapse and the effect it had on my family and people I know, it only reaffirmed what I thought already, which are that, banks will engage in predatory schemes. Particularly on people who do not have any other option. I used to use check cashing to cash my checks, check cashing places, because there are no banks in the predominantly Black working community that I lived in. The banks are not accessible. They're not something that you could really get to without a car when I was a young person. Now that I remember, or it was a trek. It was a long way. Check cashing places were everywhere. Check cashing was not something rare in my community. Like I can just imagine back to that time, and I can just think about 2 check cashing places within maybe 4 or 5 blocks of my house. And the experience there were a lot of people in there, working people. It wasn't just people my age, a lot of older people, and they were cashing checks, they were paying bills, and they were paying fees. As a person who might make $300 or might make $200, $5 doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a fee that you shouldn't have to pay for the convenience of being able to function in the society. And also, a lot of us didn't have good credit. Our parents didn't have good credit, because we know that, credit is a luxury of having income. If you don't have income and you're always in the red, then credit is something you use to get by. It's not something you can use to get ahead. When you're a poor person, you have a different interaction with the system, and the system is allowed to prey on you in a way that it is not allowed to when you're not poor. That first bank was a particularly negative experience, but it was not an uncommon experience. So, I didn't need to go to several different banks to know what was going on and that this was widespread, because across my community, most people barely had enough to get by. And so it was almost a regular thing with all of my friends who were just getting their first bank accounts. And, with my parents who, my father really refused to bank for a long time. And they still don't trust them. I can't remember when I first got a bank account, but I remember the first bank. It was Wachovia. I was out in California, and it was my first job out of high school. I was making $10 an hour to be some kind of assistant in a plumbing supply house. My checks were $325 a week, I still remember. So I would take these checks and I would take them to the bank. I would put them in the bank account, which was an upgrade over a check cashing place, which charged me $5 and was generally kind of a dangerous situation. I'd be walking out with a lot of cash in an area where you don't want to be walking around with a lot of cash. So I had this bank account at Wachovia. It was kind of exciting. You get an ATM card, you feel like I'm now a functioning member of society, like I'm doing things. But what ended up happening was that money, while it was good for somebody who was 18, was not nearly enough. I was making more money than my mother was making than any of my cousins were making. And so that money was stretched very thin in a house with 3 siblings and me being the oldest. And so oftentimes I ran out of money, which led to overdraft fees. And you know, in the beginning it was calculated, right? It's like, okay, well, I really need this $100. So I'm gonna overdraft and I'll just pay the 35 on the back end, because in my mind, I needed the money more than I could be concerned about the debt. But you know, first it would be one charge every now and then eventually, you know, you get hit with the big one. It's kind of like if you're always 5 minutes late, one day you're 30 minutes late, and that's kind of how it was. So I remember that first time. I don't remember how much exactly it was because it was a long time ago, but I know it was over $300. I was very mad about it. And basically what they did was I had a whole bunch of charges, and I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do these small charges right up until I get to, you know, where I'm gonna have $0, and then I'm gonna do this several $100 charge right on top of that. And so I'm gonna have to pay this $25 or $23 back, but it's okay because I need the money. They organized the charges in a way so that the big charge came first and the smaller charges came after. So suddenly, like, this scheme that I had worked out, right, ended up being like a $3 charge, a $4 charge, like a $7 charge, and all those charges had a $23 fee attached to them. And so in the end, I ended up, you know, being overdrafted over $300. And so, like, I'm really upset. Like, I'm just like, you know, I'm not paying it, right? Like, I'm just, you know, I'm just not paying it. And they were just like, okay, well, if you don't pay it, you won't be able to get a bank account anywhere else. So, you know, I had to pay it. I was pretty unhappy about it. So I think that was like my first real, like, this is a really negative, predatory thing. Being that the post office is the cheapest place to get a money order, being that, you know, they are generally the cheapest way to ship things, and there's sort of this understanding that going to the post office means you're getting a good deal, I think that there is a much higher level of trust in an institution that is going to give you financial services that is not also attempting to steal your money as a side job. I would go to the post office to get my money orders. It was convenient, it was easy, and it was cheaper, which is, I think, the key thing to reiterate is that when you don't have a lot of money, those little dollars count if you can find a way to save them. When you think about, like, financial things that have to do with your money, the post office is always the cheapest for you to ship things. They have cheaper priority, cheaper one day than UPS or FedEx. And so there's already sort of like this understanding that, you know, at the post office, you're getting a fair deal. They're also not a predatory financial institution where you probably, if you don't have a lot of money, you have an experience with overdraft fees. You have an experience with loans. You have an experience with any number of predatory financial schemes that banks participate in. It's a lot easier to trust somebody who is, like, you know, gonna do a transaction with you that's not also walking in, like, trying to steal your shirt at the same time.